2019, Formula Ford celebrates its 50th anniversary here in Australia. That's 5 decades of fantastic racing and brilliant engineering that's helped launch some of the biggest and best careers in the country. To mark the milestone, more than 50 cars have turned out here at the Phillip Island Classic. Let's chat to some of the star drivers and feature some very unique Australian-built cars that are racing here this weekend. Richard Davison, you were a contemporary Formula Ford racer, you're the father of an Australian Formula Ford champion, and now you're racing an historic Formula Ford. There's not much you haven't done in this category.
It's where I started, it's probably where I'm going to finish. Did a few things in between, and obviously spent a lot of time with my boys helping their careers get going in the 90s. Just the best category in the world, I think everybody agrees with that. But right now I'm just living the dream, I'm having a ball, and if I can sort of run up there somewhere near some of these young guys, it gives me a lot of satisfaction.
Tell us about the early days. Tell us about how you got involved in the category in the first place.
Lex, my dad, died when I was 10, so I didn't have that parental guidance to help me into motorsport, which is pretty difficult when you're just trying to work it out on your own. Fair amount of family pressure not to get into motor racing as well, for the obvious reasons. So a chance meeting with a guy by the name of Rhett Parker, who was running an Elfin 600 back in 1975. He was selling his car and going to England to try his hand, so I ended up buying his car, the 600, raced that for a season, got the taste, and the taste has stayed with me for the rest of my life.
And obviously when it came time for Alex and Will to get involved in the sport, you saw this as the obvious place to take them from karting for the next step of their career?
There simply wasn't another, not only not another choice, it's the logical progression. I have a view, shared by many, not by all, that drivers and young engineers learn a lot more in this category than they ever will going into a control category with wings and slicks. You've got to work very hard to get a car to work that doesn't have downforce, that has not a lot of natural grip with tyres. And this is where some of the great drivers of the world have emerged from, and there's no accident. And it's the same with the young engineers as well. It's free enough where there's lots of things for them to change, experiment with, shocks, springs, geometry, you name it. So I personally think it is just the best training ground that a young driver can have.
Will obviously has gone on and had a great career, and he's won the Bathurst 1000 twice, but it must have been incredibly proud given the history that the family has in Australian motorsport and in Formula Ford when Will won that title in 2001.
Yeah, it was a great thrill. Alex missed out by 2 points at the final round in 1999, which was, just very disappointing for him. And look, it's not a hard luck story, but Alex was always the trailblazer. Even when we got into karting, I didn't know anything about karting. By the time Will came along, I'd sort of got it sorted out. We got into Formula Ford. I was all at sea. By the time Will came along, we had this thing pretty well sorted out. But yeah, an amazing thrill. When you look back on it now with the two Wills, Will Power and Will Davison going wheel to wheel, no one was, of course, aware then of what the future for both of them would be. But the standard was extraordinary, and Jamie Whincup biting at their heels right behind. So it was a great thrill, and it's been even a bigger thrill to see Michael Ritter and Maria Ritter of Sonic, which I started with Michael back in '97, go on to have so many Formula Ford champions.
And when it came time to make your own comeback, when the boys had gone on and had their own careers, you chose to come back to Formula Ford. Tell us how that sort of came about.
My brother Chris had already got back involved with historic Formula Ford, and he was at me, everybody was at me to get rid of the Formula 5000, which fortunately I did, and I found a buyer for it, and had a run. I leased a car in 2015 at Winton, sort of got the bug. Went over and did the Walter Hayes Festival at Brands Hats, at Silverstone, which was another great tick off the box, so to speak. And then came back and bought this car, affectionately known as Pammy. And I've just enjoyed myself so immensely ever since.
You haven't lost it either. You're capable of getting up there and running right at the front, particularly at Bathurst as well. I mean, you still can go pretty hard in these things.
Bathurst was just an extraordinary event for me to win the 3 races there, and again, I guess complete another family circle. You know, my dad Lex won the Australian Grand Prix there in '58. Will's had 2 Bathurst victories, as everybody would know. Alex won there in Carrera Cup and tied up the Australian Carrera Cup Championship in, I think it was '04. I've left my run a bit late, but to come back this year and win at Bathurst, even drive at Bathurst, but let alone win at Bathurst, all 3 generations of the family have won up there, and that's pretty special.
Anthony, man, you played a pivotal role in putting together this fantastic celebration of 5 decades of Formula Ford racing. You must be very proud to see such a fantastic turnout.
As you said, it's 50 years to get a good quality field of 50 plus cars. It's fantastic. We've got a really good cross section of early FA cars, FB. Look, there is a lot of FC cars, but it's a very good cross section.
We talk a lot about the 5 decades of Formula Ford. It's a fantastic thing to celebrate, but this event draws a massive grid of Formula Fords regardless of what the year is. It speaks volumes about the health of historic Formula Ford in this country.
Oh, look, definitely. Formula Ford, look, it just seems to be going strength to strength. At this particular event especially, you know, it's the biggest historic meeting in the Southern Hemisphere. It's just a brilliant circuit. You know, we've got competitors, New Zealand, UK. You know, people watch MotoGP here and they just go, look, you know, we just got to come here and have a go.
And how's your weekend going in that fantastic looking RF86?
Probably should be up a few more spots, but I'm keeping out of trouble, going reasonably competitive. So hopefully just keep it all together for the remaining races.
Tim Blanchard, 2007 Australian Formula Ford champion, 12 years after your title and you're still racing these things. We can't keep you out of them.
Jeez, I didn't realise it was that long. So, yeah, I love racing Formula Ford. It's our family's had a long history with the category, and so it's something I really enjoy. And you know, racing at Phillip Island and Formula Ford with 50 other cars is really good fun.
Now, your dad just missed out on an Australian Formula Ford championship in 1992, I think it was. You went and won one. It must have been a great thing for the family to get a title.
Yeah, he loves that being brought up, but yeah, obviously, you know, Dad finished second in the championship twice and third once, I think, so it's always very close, but never actually won it. He won the Australian Formula Ford Festival 3 times, but never won the actual championship. So to win the championship and get our family name on the championship in 2007 was pretty special for me and the whole family.
Are there any highlights or anything specific from the 2007 season that you remember?
Yeah, I guess winning at Winton. I qualified on pole, won all 3 races at Winton, and as I mentioned, Dad won the Formula Ford Festival at Winton 3 years in a row, so it was kind of pretty special to go and win the 3 races at Winton, given the family history at that track in Formula Ford.
Is it just like old times, you know? Does it all come flooding back straight away, even though you've spent the last few years driving supercars and all sorts of other things?
Yeah, it comes back pretty quick. The frustration when you come on the straight in the lead and get swamped in the slipstream, you forget about that pretty quickly, but yeah, they're great fun. Like, you can actually race people in this series, and it's really good racing.
And there's some family significance with this car as well, because it's one that your dad raced back in the day.
Yeah, so the car I'm racing this weekend is the 88 Van Diemen. So that was my dad's first Formula Ford. So at the end of the 89 season, we kept that one when he moved to a Swift. And yeah, so it's pretty cool to be able to drive my dad's first Formula Ford down here and win some races with it.
Big Bennett, you're racing an Elfin 600 that's been in your family for longer than you have.
I certainly have. This weekend, I think, running Laurie's car. I wouldn't like to make him choose.
Fantastic history for that car. Your father, Laurie Bennett, bought it new in 1971. He's owned it ever since. There can't be that many genuine one-owner Elfins getting about.
No, I don't think there would be. He bought it in 71 off Gary Cooper and went over to Adelaide to pick it up and raced it right through the 70s before putting it away. and then pulled it back out in 96 for historic Formula Ford.
Yeah, I bought it new, 1971, and I raced it for about 6 years in what was in the TAA Driver to Europe series. I parked it up then. In fact, I picked it up with a fork truck and put it up in the roof of the workshop, and there it sat for some 20 odd years. And when it became an historic vehicle, everyone contacted me to say, yeah, whatever happened to your little Elfin 600 Formula Ford? And I said, well, I know where it is, I've still got it. It was up there with the possums living in it. I pulled it out and decided, it took me a couple of years to return it back to its original condition, get an engine and transmission and whatnot, and put it all back together. And I thought, yeah, perhaps I'll do one race in it, and that'll do me. I'll get that out of my system. I'll do one race, which was a terrible mistake, because I've been racing ever since.
You've been doing a bit of racing yourself for quite a number of years now, but it must be special to actually get in and drive that exact car.
This year being the 50th year of Formula Ford, to be driving one of the original cars, which is my father's car and a one-owner car, it's a real special piece of history, and I just want to get out and enjoy it. It's not about being competitive, it's just having fun, having a smile.
You say that, but those old Elfins go pretty well. They're pretty slippery, and there's a few of them that run fairly close to the front of the field, relatively speaking, for their age, particularly here at Phillip Island.
They are. They're actually a really nice car to drive. They're very stable. So around Phillip Island, particularly over Lukey Heights, you've got very good car stability. So they're quite quick, considering they're a pretty old car.
David Roberts, 1988 Australian Formula Ford champion. Tell us how you first got involved in the category.
My mother and father used to race back in the post-war era. Mum rallied and Dad used to race his own specials, and so it's always been in the family. When I was young, I got into motocross. Used to race with Brad Jones and Neil Crompton motocross, and then I broke a few bones on the motorbike and said, I think I need to be in something that's a bit safer. So we jumped into an open wheeler, and that's how it all sort of started.
There hasn't been an era of Formula Ford that wasn't really competitive, but in the late 80s there, the Driver to Europe series, they must have been fantastic days as a competitor when you were fighting up the front.
Yeah, I think that was probably almost the ultimate era, that late 80s, early 90s. You know, Mark Larkham, Russell Ingall, Andrew Winton, just some fantastic drivers around then, and it was really competitive, 40-car grids, and from the front to the back was really close.
Anything that stands out from your title-winning season?
Probably there was an event at Oran Park which was quite amazing. I was lucky enough to get out front and take a win, but every time I came around there was another car rolled, so I think they rolled 4 cars or something in the one race, and Chris Matic was upside down on the main straight, and in those days you didn't put a red flag or a course car out, so we were racing, going underneath Chris's upside down car, and it was pretty cool.
So when you decided to you won your championship in a Van Diemen, and you decided to make a comeback, and you're in a Swift.
Yeah, well, see, I won the championship in 88, and this historic category goes to 89, so I sort of looked at it and went, I don't want to bring another Van Diemen back, there's plenty of those. And if I'd stayed in 89, if I had been allowed to, because when you win the championship, you weren't allowed to come back in those days, I probably would have jumped into one of Mick Kouros's Swifts. And I thought, well, why don't we do that now? So we went and found an 89 Swift and built that up, and it brings a bit of interest to the category because it's another different car, and that's what Formula Ford was all about. You know, 40 cars and 30 different manufacturers in the early days, and it's something that's sorely missing from motorsport today.
Phil Marinon, driver of the very unique Australian-built Galloway Formula Ford. Give us a rundown of the history of the car.
Yeah, fantastic car, built by Harry Galloway in New South Wales in the early 80s. He sold it on, he didn't have a buyer for it at the time. Bruce Connolly bought it. He got together with Wally Story. They ended up finishing off the car completely. Mid-82, they raced it a couple of rounds, the state stuff, just to sort of shake it down. And then in 1983, they went to the national competition and also the state competition in New South Wales and just cleaned up completely. A fantastic car, unique design, very easy to work on, and unfortunately I can't drive it anywhere near as quick as Bruce.
When you're driving the car, can you sense that, this was a title winner because of the way it reacts, the way that it handles?
I don't drive it fast enough, unfortunately. I just don't have the skill set, which is unfortunate. But there's video of it from TV where Bruce would spin, lose the nose cone, and still win. He just had a great skill set. I'm sure the car has a lot to do with it, no doubt. But Bruce's skills just are fantastic. And he went on to bigger and better things, of course.
Bruce Connolly, 1983 Australian Formula Ford champion. Tell us about how you got involved in the category.
It was through some very good long-time friends of mine, Wally Story and Elwyn Bickley. And I had a couple of guest drives at Winton, and I was racing motocross bikes then, and had a thought, and I thought I'd like to get into Formula Ford. The Driver to Europe series is competitive, so in 82 we picked up the Galloway, ran the series in 83 and won the state series and the national series, so it was a good year.
Do you remember much about the Galloway and what it was like to drive?
It was probably a little bit ahead of its time in the sense that you sat fairly forward like the current Formula 1 cars at the time, and a little bit light in the tail, a little bit light duty in a couple of the uprights. I had a couple of altercations and uprights folded, and so we strengthened those, but it was a good little car, very responsive on new tyres. Put one set of tyres per meeting and you put them on and the car would really respond to it.
And it must be nice seeing the 50th anniversary celebrations here and seeing the Galloway out there and so many cars on the grid. I mean, it's fantastic.
It is. I mean, the cars are sensational. The preparation is fantastic. They look better than they did when they were new almost, It's just, it's a real credit to everyone. And so many cars out there, competitive as per normal. And Phil's done a good job with the Galloway, keeping it going, and it looks terrific.
David Reynolds, 2004 Australian Formula Ford champion. You've gone on to become a Bathurst 1000 winner, one of the top supercars drivers. But this is where it all started. Not in this car, but one not entirely dissimilar to it.
Yeah, man. 2004 was a awesome year. I actually started in Formula Ford in 2002, halfway through the year. I made the switch from go-karts to Formula Ford. 2003, we had our own car, and it was just a family-run team. And then 2004. I joined Sonic Motor Racing, and that's when I sort of became a much better driver and competitor through the guidance of Michael Ritter, and he sort of coached me and put me in good stead for my entire life after I left that team. But mate, it was some of the best years of my life racing Formula Ford. It was so much fun, it was so close, the competition, and when you're younger everything seems so much bigger, so for me that was like the World Championships. I had to win it. And I had a lot of fun doing it.
It must be nice, given how fond you are of the category, to play a very small part in the 50th anniversary for Formula Ford here in Australia by driving this car today.
It's been 50 years. That's an incredible feat, I suppose. But yeah, so when I was growing up, anyone who was any good at driving, they won Formula Ford. If you won Formula Ford Championship, you were almost guaranteed a good future in supercars or open wheelers overseas or something like that. So it's been a great stepping stone for all young kids. It's semi-affordable out of go-karts, and they always say if you can drive a Formula Ford car fast, you can drive any car around the world fast. So yeah, it's good.
John Miles, you're kind of a stalwart of historic Formula Ford racing. Tell us how you got involved in it.
I think it was 2005 or 2004. Dad picked up a Reynolds historic Formula Ford from England, box of bits. It raced in South Africa and brought it over here, and we put it back together and took it out for, I think it was Sandown. A bit unprepared. I was unprepared, the car was unprepared, and had a great time. The bug sort of bit. I'd never driven, never go-karted or anything before. But with Dad's background in motor racing, this was a good father-son thing to do, and all of a sudden I realised actually, I kind of like this thing. So and the atmosphere and the social aspect and the guys that we were racing with was really good, And look, so we came back the next year. And all of a sudden we thought, we've got to get a proper engine built here, and we got to start actually taking, use the right ratios, for Christ's sake. So yeah, we did that, and it just grew, and every year we were doing the Phillip Island, Sandown, and we started doing Winton, and look, here we are now. I think it's it's the best part of 15 years later, still here and still loving it, and it's very competitive, and yet there's good guys everywhere. So yeah, we keep doing it as far as I'm concerned.
A lot of young guys would use historic Formula Ford as a stepping stone to maybe a modern car or something, but when it came time for you to upgrade, you just bought a better historic Formula Ford. True. Yeah, it was still an upgrade for us, but yeah. And look, to be honest with you, the later '89 Van Diemen is there's a bit of a difference between our earlier car. You can see how they progressed design and evolved it. But yes, a lot of people would be trying to use a stepping stone. But the interesting thing with the historics is, even that car, the Reynolds now we've held for, as I say, nearly 15 years. The Van Diemen we had since 2013. You get these cars and you hold on to them, and you keep racing them. Whereas, in the other categories, people are in a state round for a year or 2 years, and then they're on to the next thing, and same with the national. Whereas we sort of, people driving their own cars tend to take a little bit more care as well. But also it's a budget thing, we don't have the budget to do anything else, so we kind of stick with this, and we know that once we bought the car, we keep all the four corners on it, it should be good for the next race, and that's kind of how we've ended up where we are. And I enjoy it, and it's competitive. If it wasn't competitive, you'd probably want to try and do something else. But I feel there's some good drivers in the series, and it definitely makes it worthwhile, and that you're being tested, you're not just out there wandering around by yourself. You're actually racing genuine, good drivers, which is what it's all about, right? Perkins, 1974 Driver to Europe winner.
Yep.
You just drove a Formula Ford for the first time in the best part of 4 decades. How was it?
It brought back old memories. It almost felt like coming home. It really was. The car is exactly the same as the one I used to have. The track has changed a little bit. It's more civilised, but it really was a welcome change. To get in the car, it was just so much like home.
You were one of the champions in the early days of Formula Ford. It's remarkable that, it's continued on for 5 decades and it's still producing future champions, and it's still such a strong category.
Yeah, I think the ability to come up with good drivers, this formula does prove that it can. At the moment, my son has started racing Formula Ford, and just last week actually at Sandown, and I'm hoping he can go on to bigger and better things. But to see this turnout here today of Formula Fords, it's really brings home to me what an important formula it is to racing, and for drivers to learn, and for drivers to just continue as a social activity.
But what a fantastic place for him to go and learn all those things in the same category that you guys started out in all those years ago.
We go out testing sometimes, and I'll have a drive and he'll have a drive, and I'll ask him what he thinks is wrong with it, and I'll tell him what I think is wrong with it, and we'll make alterations, and I think he learns from it. I think he learns a lot.